everybody, welcome to Movieverse. My name is Brian. Today, Greg is joining me, and we are doing a review for Marvel's Ant-Man. Now, first, we're going to do a spoiler-free review. So if you guys haven't seen the movie, you're safe to stay and watch our review. And then later, after we give our scores, then we'll start going into some spoiler discussion about some specific things that happened in the movie, what we liked, what we didn't like, and that kind of thing. So to go ahead and get us started, Greg, what was your general thoughts of the movie before we get into our likes and dislikes?
I thought it was a well-paced movie, very well-balanced. Like, it didn't lean too heavily on the comedy or action or drama.
Yeah.
All the characters were very relatable. Probably the most humanizing Marvel film yet. Like, yeah. I could see myself, at least partially, in just about every single one of those characters.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it beginning to end.
Yeah, for me, everybody knows I am a huge Marvel fan, right? But I'm not a blind Marvel fan. And, on the internet, I've heard some pretty, good reviews surrounding Ant-Man and how some people were pleasantly surprised. But for me, overall, I'd have to say, it has good action scenes, it has good dramatic scenes, it has good comedy. But to me, it's just a basic standard representation of a Marvel standalone, solo origin type story. And I can go into more detail what I mean by that, when we get into the spoilers. But there's some things that happen in this movie that, for me, it kind of just seemed like, it's just things that I've seen in a Marvel movie before. Not talking about the shrinking and things like that. And I didn't walk out of this movie feeling like I usually do after seeing a Marvel movie.
So I felt I was excited when the movie was over. I honestly, I think it's probably my third favorite Marvel movie.
Yeah.
Once the film actually got going, I will admit, my one major thing, it felt like it took a while to get going.
Okay.
But outside of that, once it actually got going, I thought it was one of the best. I thought it was one of the best Marvel movies we've had.
All right, so let's go ahead and let's talk about some of what we liked about the movie. For me, my favorite moments in this movie were the interactions between Hank Pym and Scott Lang, or Hank Pym and Hope Van Dyne, or Hope Van Dyne and Scott Lang. I like the interactions between those three characters. I felt were the most powerful moments for me. When you there's a great scene between Hank Pym and Hope Van Dyne where they're talking about things that progressed, and I'm not going to give away any spoilers for it, but there's a scene in there where it's pretty emotional between Hank Pym and his daughter, and so that scene for me was great. And then Paul Rudd, Scott Lang thrown into that mix. I felt like those three characters, which they should be, but they were the strongest characters in the movie.
Yeah,
and you could definitely tell that there was. That they definitely got along on set. You could tell that they had, a connection to where you see it on screen. Another favorite scene of mine comes in the middle of the movie. There's a action sequence with Scott Lang, kind of like a test run with his Ant-Man suit, and some events that transpire in that scene.
We'll talk about that more in the spoilers.
Yeah.
That was a great scene.
Yeah, that scene for me was probably my favorite scene of the movie, just because it kind of showed you what Scott Lang is capable of as Ant-Man. And then that first initial scene where he Scott shrinks down, where he first has the suit and he shrinks down for the first time. That scene to me was really cool of how they shot it.
That was a very good example of how they're filming this world.
Yeah,
you get exactly what it's really like to be
Ant-Man. and you can feel the that first scene that he shrinks down was very it threw me a little bit. I was kind of like, what? And it wasn't a bad thing. It was more of it's like he's shrinking down for the first time, and what he could be going through mentally. That's kind of how I felt mentally, kind of trying to readjust myself to this new world as you could see it, because it is so small. But yeah, what were some of your likes about the movie?
Just like you said, the dynamic between like the main three characters, Hope Van Dyne, Hank Pym, and Scott Lang. Like, that was spot on pretty much every single scene.
Yeah.
As I keep looking down because I'm looking at my notes on my phone, so that's why.
Yeah, bear with
us. Because the other thing, I thought all of the fight scenes were very well choreographed and well shot, like cinematically.
Yeah. Especially the scenes where he is like shrinking down and fighting at the same time. Yeah, those were really interesting.
Then, like I mentioned before, like it's a very balanced movie. You don't get too dramatic, too comedic, too action oriented.
Yeah,
it all very balances and very flows together very nicely.
I have one exception to that, but we'll get into that once you're done.
Then the other thing, the kind of last thing, like I felt like the stakes were just high enough where like you see the need for Ant-Man.
Yeah.
Yet, it's very personal and level that you don't need to include the Avengers.
And I also like how they didn't include the Avengers, and we keep talking about spoilers, so we'll get into that. But they did a really good job of basically stating why they're not going to have the Avengers come and help, which I thought was very interesting. It was very, very well handled. That more so than in any other Marvel movie, I would say.
Like it felt very connected to the Marvel universe, without actually ham-fisting a cameo or something
relying on it. Yeah. So let's go ahead and get into our dislikes. I want to touch on, you talked about how it was all very balanced, about how there wasn't too much action, there wasn't too much comedy, there wasn't too much drama. It was very balanced. I would agree to that, except for one thing, which was the scene that I talked about earlier. It was a very, very emotional scene between Hank Pym and his daughter, and then Paul Rudd comes in and just throws like kind of like a joke in there. And I'm just like, man, like I was actually really into that scene because I'm like, man, you have Michael Douglas, who's a great actor, and then you have Evangeline Lilly, who is very emotional in that scene, and it's a beautiful moment. And then you kind of, to me, you diminish the emotional scene by throwing in that little zinger that he did. And even though I liked it in a way, it took me out of that moment, is what I'm trying to say.
But at the same time, if you don't throw in that jab in there, then you run the risk of you're going down this very like dramatic rabbit hole, like deep, which then I think would derail the movie even more.
But it was a very emotional scene between a father and his daughter, and when you talk about this movie and themes that it has, it's very much father-daughter themed.
Yeah,
and then father and son I never had themed kind of thing, and so when you have that moment, like I want that moment to, maybe if they would have gave it a little bit more space before he threw in that zinger, and like a little bit more of a pause, and then he went in, I would have been okay with it. But and
also at the same time, I feel like it was very Scott Lang-ish to do something like that.
Yeah, I guess so. But one other dislike that I had, and whenever you talk about a Marvel movie, this seems to be a reoccurring theme, is that for me, the villain seemed underdeveloped and kind of lackluster. They had this whole the relation. I would like to see the relationship between Darren Cross and Hank Pym kind of fleshed out a little bit more, because they kind of mentioned it, but they didn't really go that into depth with it. So I would have liked to see that. And I feel like if they would have done that, it would have added a lot more dimensions to the character of Darren Cross, aka Yellow Jacket. But what were some of your dislikes?
My only real major dislike was, like I said, it had this really great opening scene.
Yeah.
And then it was kind of like a half hour before the next, interesting thing happened.
Yeah.
So I feel like it kind of got off to the slow start, and that's really kind of the only major thing. Like, there's a couple nitpicky things I could, come up with, but, overall, that's really the only scene or only thing I really have to gripe with.
Yeah, and before we give our scores, I'm just gonna say there wasn't much that I could say was wrong with this movie. It seemed a very stable movie, and it was able to hold its own and not rely too much on the Avengers or just bombarding you with references. Yeah. It had some good cameos in it.
And nice allusions and references.
Yeah, exactly. It had nice cameos. It had nice references. It had nice tips of the hat to comic book fans, and so where I can say that coming out of the movie, I didn't feel as like hyped up as I usually do about a Marvel movie, it was still a good movie, and so I give it a score of 8 out of 10.
So my score is, because I enjoyed it a lot. My score, I'm going with 9.3.
9.3. Damn, that's
like to me, it is a movie that once you get done watching this video, you should go out and see it as soon as you can.
All right, so we have 9.3. That's pretty high, and a lot of people have said that they like it more than Avengers: Age of Ultron, which is cool. I'm not sure where I stand on it. I'll have to go see Ant-Man again before I can make that kind of discussion. But in the next 9 minutes, we have to go through 5 topics that I want to talk about that are spoilery. So I want to talk about the initial scene where he shrinks down. And I have it down like I felt like it was kind of like trippy, like it kind of sent you through a loop, because he basically gets in a tub, he presses the button to shrink down, and he, you see how big the tub is compared to him, and it's just like, man. And then he goes through the pipes, and before he goes through the pipes, he's like running away from the water, which I thought that was super cool. How that was like visually, I liked.
Yeah, like that. I went and saw it in 3D, and that was probably the like money shot for 3D.
Yeah, like the water coming towards him, and it was almost like a tidal wave kind of, but it was in a bathtub.
Yeah,
so it just kind of gives you like the perspective of size. And then like he goes through the tunnels or whatever, and he ends up in or not the tunnels, but because he gets out of the bathtub. And then the scene with Michael Pena, like he's the one that started the water, and then he starts to like take off his clothes, and then Scott Lang's just like, oh, that's something I didn't want to see. Like, but so that scene I felt was really cool. And then the middle scene that I talked about before, that was a cool action sequence with Scott Lang, is his kind of like his test run. Hank Pym's testing him to see if he can pull off this heist.
To steal something from
a empty warehouse, basically. Is what
basically one of Howard Stark's abandoned warehouses, which was the Avengers facility at the end of Age of Ultron.
When he said it was an abandoned warehouse in upstate New York, I'm like, before they even showed it, I turned to my girlfriend, I'm like, dude, that's the new Avengers headquarters, because I remember in Age of Ultron, I was like, upstate New York. And I'm just like, no way. And then it pans over, like, and he's flying over it, and I'm just like, yep. And it has like, new Avengers headquarters or whatever. And he's like, oh, I don't think this is an abandoned warehouse. And he's like, you son of a bitch! Like, and he's just like, abort the mission. He's like, no, I'm doing it. And he goes, and so anyways, he ends up fighting Falcon. And so I felt like that action scene where he's fighting Falcon, one, it shows off how formidable Scott Lang is as Ant-Man, but it also shows off a lot of Falcon and his abilities.
It makes Ant-Man a believable character. Like, the fight felt even, and like I said, I went back to the well choreographed, like, they were holding, like, each of them were holding their own. Yeah,
exactly. Like Falcon was doing some like moves that we haven't seen before, where he was like flapping his wings together, and it kind of like blew Scott Lang back, and there's a lot of like interesting moves that they incorporated into that fight scene. And you have Scott Lang like shrinking and getting bigger, and then like when he's trying to like get away from Falcon, or like come back at him, he like shrinks down, so Falcon has a little bit of trouble finding him. And so that was super interesting. And then I want to go into a scene that's closer to the end. But before I do, I want to talk about that emotional scene between Hank Pym and his daughter. And he's talking about how or why he won't let his daughter put on the Ant-Man suit to complete this mission herself, because she has been working with Hank Pym, and going undercover as Darren Cross's assistant, and she's very well versed in martial arts, and obviously kind of like spy-ish, being an undercover like spy, if you will, for Darren Cross. And basically Hank Pym says the reason why he doesn't want her putting on the suit is because that's how his wife
passed or died.
Passed away or died, by going subatomic and going too small and not being able to come back out of it. And so I thought that was a really emotional scene between Hank Pym and his daughter. And that comes to fruition when Scott Lang is trying to pull off this heist, and he ends up fighting Yellow Jacket, and he has to go subatomic to basically sabotage Yellow Jacket's suit. And so you see that scene where he's just getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and And what did you think about that scene?
I mean, I felt like visually it was kind of a little out of place. Like,
really,
it just felt when he gets towards the end of it, like it felt, and then like kind of him coming back as well. Like it felt like should be on drugs. Like watching this, like
that's what I liked about it, because when you there's an interview that Kevin Feige did where he said that the Doctor Strange movie will be very much like, or he said it'd be like an acid trip of a movie, right? Yeah. So I felt like going into that subatomic world. If you guys know the name of what Hank Pym called it, or what the name of that realm is, because I know there's a certain name for it, I can't remember off the top of my head.
I said the quantum realm.
Quantum realm. I think that might have been what it was. When he goes into that realm, I think it kind of gave us an idea.
I mean, and it did
of what
and
Doctor
he did say
Strange
kind of
look like.
your knowledge of what exists, time space, will be doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, exactly. So I thought that gave us a kind of a good look at what we could possibly expect from a Doctor Strange movie, where reality's warping and you're kind of seeing things folding on each other. So I thought that scene was really interesting. And then we have the two end credit scenes. So the first end credit scene sets up Hope Van Dyne being the Wasp, and it shows Hank Pym leading her into this room where they have this suit,
probably about 2/3 completed suit.
Yeah, suit of the Wasp, and she just turns. And she's looking at the suit, and she's about damn time. Which, it could be about damn time that she gets to be the hero, or about damn time that Marvel has a female superhero. I
think it's both.
Yeah, I think it is. And so that's really cool. Evangeline Lilly, you've seen her. She was in the Hobbit movies. I forget her character's name, but she was super good in those movies. I'm really excited to see what she does with the Wasp character and how she interacts with the other Avengers characters. And then the second end credit scene was a Captain America Civil War kind of. It was basically a scene straight out of Captain America.
Yeah, they said they filmed that scene for Civil War.
Yeah, and they just added it. Yeah, because it was referencing. And basically, it was Captain America, the Winter, and it had Bucky the Winter Soldier, and also Falcon, and it looked like an abandoned warehouse or something. It looked like they were on the run or in hiding.
And basically, kind of the way Steve Rogers talking makes it sound like the events of Civil War have already started.
Yeah, and so that was pretty cool. And they were looking for somebody to add to their team, and Falcon was like, "I know a guy."
And I think it's more basic to specifically help Bucky, because you see his metal arm in a vice.
Yeah.
So I think
so maybe they need Scott Lang to steal. So
because he said it once, even just to go in there and fix it, because he is an electrical engineer.
True. Yeah. So so Falcon says, "I know a guy," referencing to Ant-Man. So it's basically tells us that Scott Lang, Ant-Man will be in Civil War, which we already knew. Yeah.
And
some set photos that leaked
most likely be on Captain's side.
Yeah.
Especially since he's a convicted.
They might come to him for help, and he might turn them down.
Yeah.
Because actually, you know what? They said that Hank Pym said that he doesn't like Starks. Yeah. So maybe he will be on Captain America's side. But guys, that's going to do it. We're going to have to wrap this up because we're about to run out of time. But what else did you have to say?
Let's have one quickly the Baskin Robbins scene at the very beginning.
Yeah.
When he gets fired, and then and the scene.
He's like, "What you do is awesome, but you're fired."
In the fight scene when they're inside the briefcase.
Yeah.
And they hit the iPhone, and he says, "I will disintegrate you."
Yeah.
And he plays "Disintegrate" by The Cure.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Those two scenes are classic. Those are two Edgar Wright scenes that were left in the movie.
I think the train scene was also an Edgar Wright scene.
But that was great as well. I mean, we're running out of time to talk about that.
But you're right. There's so many. There was actually, looking back, there were so many great scenes in this movie. Maybe I was just in a mood.
Or you're just expecting something different. Probably.
I think what it was is I heard from another YouTube channel that's more popular that there was going to be a Spider-Man end credit scene, and there wasn't. So I kind of, once I expected it, I was kind of let down.
It's kind of like a one-off line.
Yeah. But all right, guys, so that's going to do it for our review and spoiler discussion of Marvel's Ant-Man. Tell us what you guys thought down in the comments. What would you grade this movie out of 10? And also, what scenes did you guys like out of this movie? What stood out to you most? So go ahead, click the thumbs up button, comment down below what you guys thought. As always, subscribe to Movieverse if you like what you saw here, and make sure that you guys come back to our channel to check out our movie reviews, trailer reactions, and our movie news show. And as always, I'll see you guys next time.
Go see Ant-Man.
Do it.